to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
These sick fucks, you've seen one too many.
I said, don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first official movie review, the first full episode of It Slays. I'm the humble host this time.
This time, he's always the host.
Every time.
Well, I'm saying I'm not the host with the most this time. I don't need to continuously brag.
No, he's humble this time. This one time, he's humble.
That's right. I decided this one time I could be humble. So yeah, welcome, and I'll let everyone else say hello.
Hey. Well, I introduced myself last time. Hey, it's Exilia.
Well, what if this is the first
Yeah,
episode
okay.
they listen to? You always gotta say hello.
Hey, it's Exilia.
I should have just introduced it, really. I apologize to the listeners. That was the podcast pleb, Exilia. And then I'm sure we'll get a hello from the magic Mike of the group. Mike.
Hello, everybody. This is Mike. Welcome to our very humble podcast, which is just us shooting the shit.
Shooting the shit. So if you clicked on this audio file and did not read the name of it, we are doing our first review. Exilia, what are we doing?
It follows.
We are reviewing It Follows.
I mean, it's appropriate.
little-
It slays. First episode, it follows. I'm just saying.
A movie from 2014. One that me nor Exilia experienced in the theater.
Can I say something?
Sure. Well, I mean, you're on the podcast.
I think 2014, it was actually just at Cannes. I think it wasn't released in the United States in 2015.
I think it was, like, widely released in 2015, but I'm not an expert.
Okay, sorry. IMDb just said 2014,
How dare you.
and I decided not to do any research on that. So 2015 wide release, 2014 for all the hipster film critics.
The film festival goers.
The film festival goers.
Fuck them.
We'll start off. This will be not spoiler free. There will be tons of spoilers.
All we're going to talk about is what happened in the movie.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, pause right now. Don't take us off pause and watch the movie and then unpause us. So you
What are you even doing if you haven't?
Yeah.
What are you
If you
doing?
haven't
What are
seen
you
this
doing
movie,
with your
what are
life if you haven't seen It Follows at this point?
Exactly. So,
Also-
We have to talk about our sponsorships first.
Yeah.
Yes,
sorry,
I was going to
yes.
say, speaking of, if you may or may not have noticed that we are a very casual podcast, this is very conversational. It is not academic or critical in the least. My end of the podcast is brought to you this week by my father's homemade vintage, a blueberry wine, lightly sweetened.
Nice. And my end of the podcast is brought to you by Village Juicery in the Yorkdale Mall. I'm sick, as you may be able to hear. I went and visited my friend that works there today, and I got a Libretto Rosso cold pressed juice. It's grapefruit, orange, apple, and beet. Very delicious.
Libretto. Pardon me.
What?
Pardon me, libretto.
It's I actually looked up what the name meant. It was like interesting.
And I'm being brought to you by grapefruit bubbly sparkling water right
Delicious.
now. Delicious.
With no alcohol in it. What is this? What is this life?
Next time. I'm sorry. So yeah, It Follows is the movie directed by David Robert Mitchell. This was his debut film. I told Exilia, she said no one really would care, but I thought it'd be fun to just talk briefly that the budget for the movie was around we read 1.3 million somewhere, and Wikipedia said 2 million, and it made 23.3 million. So it
did well.
It did very well in the box office.
And it does indeed look like $1 million. It does indeed look like $1.3 million.
And so, we were saying, how are we going to tell people the gists of this movie? So I'm going to literally tell you what the description from our trusty IMDb says. It says, it follows. A young woman is followed by an unknown supernatural force after a sexual encounter.
That sums up the whole movie. We're done. The podcast is over.
It does. And cut. This is it.
Well, and I think that's probably the first thing I would bring up. We watched this through 2 days. Exilia fell asleep because we started late at night.
And I'm sick.
And she's sick. But,
and I also have no attention span.
That's right. But, the one thing that always sticks out to me when I watch this, because I do watch it a lot, is it's a very simple plot.
There really isn't much going on, you're right.
No. Sorry. I thought the exact same thing. Especially as I was watching it more critically and thinking not just about my emotions that it brings up and the beauty of it all, but it's such a simple story. But that just speaks to how good that movie is in the way of the other elements, though.
Yeah, I think everything ties together nicely. It's a simple story. And like I think we've all said kind of in the intro episode, is we all really like stylized things. And if there's one thing that it follows should never falter for anyone, it is stylized. Mm-hmm. It looks immaculate. It sounds immaculate.
Especially for what is clearly, a low-budget movie. Like, this is an indie, DIY movie, but it looks spectacular.
Yeah. And we'll mention now the music is done by Disaster Piece. I'm not familiar with him other than this. We watched the bonus features on the Blu-ray. Apparently he makes music for, cell phone games.
I was going to say video games is what I thought, yeah.
Video games.
Some game called Fez.
Fez is popular, yes.
Yeah. And, we own the soundtrack on vinyl. We love the soundtrack. It's a go-to. I listen to it on my way to work. I just love everything about the music and everything about this. What's your, general feelings on this, you guys?
I thought even though the story is so simple, it kind of captures... I have a bit of a fear of being trapped in various situations. It doesn't have to be, confined in a small space, but just being trapped and not being able to escape something that is scary or, brings some sort of anxiety. And I think for me, the movie really played to that for me. She really can't escape it at all unless she hands it off, right? But obviously, it's not that successcthen
Yeah, and it's a moral dilemma anyway, successful. Right?
Yeah, do I pass this off to somebody, and then have them deal with it? She also doesn't really. I think what was interesting too when Hugh gives it to her, he makes sure that she sees it and she realizes, because I think he understands the value of her trying to escape it and believing in it, because then it's not going to be passed back to him. But she doesn't really do that with the people that she hands it off to, especially, what's his name? Greg? The guy across the street. He doesn't believe her, right? And then he's a goner. And then what's this buddy? The guy that's the friend.
Is it
Oh, Paul. That's Paul.
Paul, right?
Yes, Keir Gilchrist from the wonderful United States of Terror.
Yeah, and like, he believes her and everything, obviously, but I mean, I think it insinuates at the end, perhaps, as they're walking down the road and there's somebody following them at the same pace as, the rest of the movie, that, maybe he's not being as careful as he should be either, so.
Exilia getting right to the end of the movie.
We've all seen the movie if we're watching this, if we're listening.
Everything must begin at the end. Let's face it.
I will say I enjoy that one of my main notes I took, I don't know if it's a positive or a negative at how good I am at taking notes, it just says, Paul is a goober.
He really is.
Maybe the word I was looking for was schmuck.
Oh, he's definitely a schmuck.
And
He's a bit of a goober, but he's definitely a schmuck.
And I think I think everyone, not just teenage boys or people that were teenage boys, but anyone that's a teenager could kind of, I guess you could, even though he's a schmuck, you could still put yourself in his shoes, that, he was really into this girl. And
they've been friends forever, and
Well, I think they had a previous relationship before
they kissed.
Yeah, before he was intimate in some way or good friends with her sister.
Yeah, because I kind of took it that he was a little younger than her.
Yes, yeah. Because she seems, she's like clearly in her late teens or early 20s, doing community college and stuff, and he seems to be maybe like just out of high school or
and
around
he
about
seems
that
to be
age.
more part of the sister Kelly's friend group, and Kelly's obviously a slightly younger.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess to bring us back to the beginning too, because I wanted to talk about. So the first scene we're introduced to is the beautiful, like, cinematography wise, the shot of the house, and then we see kind of like a unnamed female running out of this house.
In high heels, by the way, which I've never not been impressed by.
And she has a name. Her name's Annie.
Annie.
And actually, when I was doing, 5 minutes of research on this movie, it was interesting because they talk about how the names of the characters actually are in reference to other movies. So Annie, this girl's name is Annie, and Annie, it's after Annie Brackett, who was the first girl to die
in Halloween.
So, and she's
this
the first
is very,
person
very
to die,
Halloween,
right? Yeah.
Yes, because we read in J is short for Jamie.
J is like, ode to Jamie Lee Curtis, who in the movie.
Oh my god, and Paul is in Halloween too? You're blowing my mind now. Oh my god. Wow.
And Jay, like Jamie Lee Curtis's character in Halloween had a sister named Kelly, and Jay in It Follows has a sister named Kelly.
Yeah.
Yep. So Annie, running out in the high heels.
I know. I was like, take those off. Like, what are you doing?
Also, damn girl, you look good.
Yeah.
You look good in fucking high heels, and the fact that you can, like, Tyra would love it.
And we're not really introduced to what's happening, because another thing me and Exilia talked about when we were looking, because I didn't really recognize it till I read it, was that this movie has zero title card or cast credits until the very end.
Until after it's over,
you're not presented with It Follows as an opening. You're presented
You're
with
just thrown into it, yes.
You're thrown into it. You don't know why she's running.
Well, until like 3 minutes later.
Yeah. And the high heels was an issue. I was curious if she was realizing what was happening because she was running away. She only ran like 2 houses up and then made a U-turn.
Back to her house.
And ran back.
And then had that uncomfortable moment where she's, standing out on the front lawn in front of God and all the fucking neighbors in a negligee and goddamn stiletto heels saying, "Oh, hi, Dad. Everything's okay."
Yeah.
I just got fucked, but,
Don't mind me. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're introduced to, and then we're brought to our heroine of of the movie. Although, I don't know, I question, is she the heroine of the movie? I mean, when you get to the end, I think her sister and her friends kind of do more than she does.
Well, I wouldn't really call her the heroine, but she's
No.
the main character.
I mean, yes, exactly. And
The protagonist.
Yeah.
that's why this movie, I think, is so interesting in a way, because it, like, subtly just sort of plays with, like, you know, your expectations and the, like, tropes where it's, like, normally there's the one girl and then the people around her have a bit more personality than her, but are generally, like, expendable and gone.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, she is very much like just, you know, running, and her friends have to sort of like pick up the weight and help her, you know, which is, I just thought that was very interesting. And like I said, they do seem to be doing a lot of the work, and they are very central. It's more of a group effort than anything.
I totally agree, because they have to kind of carry the story, because after she, you know, gets it, right? She's kind of a shell of a human being.
Oh yeah, she falls apart. I mean, it's like
and
trauma to the extreme.
She could, I don't think she could carry the story. So they're there to do that.
Yeah, well, and like I was thinking, and like you said, Mike, like it's almost a twist, because she's not a final girl like you probably would think when you're presented her, where you say, okay, this is our main character, we're gonna get to the end of this movie, whatever it is,
it's gonna be on her to confront.
Yeah, she's gonna have the baseball bat and be the badass. What, and you know,
no, well, she totally throws that, like, final girl, you know, the, like, kind of, you know, if you speak of high camp being, like, the definition of camp, we call it, like, high final girl, you know, in that, like, she is not the final girl. She is sort of a conduit, you know, really, when you look at it.
Yeah, and then, so the next thing I had written down, too, was, and I don't know if it was the visual, just aesthetic, kind of the filter, but I had written down, seems cold as shit to be swimming. I feel cold when I look at this.
But I think, too, like, the coloring, I think it's on purpose that the coloring makes the whole movie in general look really bleak. If you look at the sky is nearly always gray, right?
Oh, and so near the end of the movie, when they're doing the final confrontation, it turns black.
And it's
black.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a rainstorm. So I think when I think of going out in a pool, I mean, I'm not going out on a gray day. It does seem cold, but this is another thing I had read as well, is that this is all meant to be kind of timeless in the way that you see people wearing bathing suits and winter coats on the same day.
Yeah, and that's so funny that you say that, because literally, you know, in my notebook, I have giant letters, like, written timeless, like, underlined 20 times. Yeah.
And if you look at, like, you can't really pinpoint an era either, because, like, the TVs, I mean, they have a friggin' landline on the wall.
And the TVs are not flat screen. They're those huge, boxy, giant TVs.
Yes,
but I mean, and that's what's so interesting about it, because there's so much going on in this movie, and I find that the timelessness of it is really the core element. Because if you look at the timelessness, you're looking at it and going, at first you go, is this like the late 90s, early 2000s?
Right.
But then
they have modern cars.
No, absolutely. And, you know, she's got that, like, e-reader, which, by the way, we'll get back to, because I have pages that I will write down about that fucking e-reader. But, and I think that's what it kind of gives this movie all those layers, because not only is it timeless, and you can't tell, like, within about a 15-year span of when this is supposed to be. But you're looking at it and going, okay, is this timeless, or are we looking at, because one of the elements of this movie is that, like, collapse of Detroit and the, like, poverty and the, you know,
decay.
Right? So you're going, like, I can walk down to the Salvation Army and, like, I'm looking at all this, like, garbagey mid-90s furniture and these boxy TVs, and I'm going, is this supposed to take place in the 90s? Or are these people so, at the lower end of the, like, tax bracket that this is, it's like the Salvation Army aesthetic, I'll call it. And I say that as somebody who's living that aesthetic, and it's like, I've seen these beds, I've seen these dressers, I've seen these TVs, to this day, and it is 2019.
Well, that's a really interesting point. I don't know a lot about the history of Detroit prior to, like, the financial collapse, for instance, which is something, obviously, led me to where I am in academia, is, like, that really was, like, an impactful event in my life, so it's something I find interesting.
Yeah.
But another thing, they don't have cell phones, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You never see any of them using cell phones, but there are modern vehicles. That's a good kind of, I guess, intuition with the Salvation Army type, like, thrift store thing too, because when Jay gets returned to the house by Hugh, and then the police are there, and you hear a neighbor say, "Oh, like, that family's such a mess."
Yeah.
Also in their home, like, their home's very disheveled. You kind of, like, it alludes the fact her dad's dead. Her mom, you only vaguely see, and I think she's always drinking. Like, obviously,
there's always a bottle somewhere. And there's always a bottle whenever the mother is in the frame. There is a bottle somewhere in the frame. Yeah.
And I was going to say, too, with the Detroit thing, because I had noticed, too, that, because I do believe it's somewhere that, I think it's when they're going to the
city,
quote-unquote, other side of the 8 Mile.
Yeah.
They do discuss that they live in suburbia.
Yeah.
But I thought it was very interesting, his choice, where the color palette doesn't change. So suburbia looks very grimy.
It does. I mean, it's still full of the collapsed empty buildings. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, that was it. I was just agreeing.
No, I thought that was really interesting, too, because when I think of suburbia, I think, solidly middle class, right? But these people, I would say, are almost working class, maybe lower middle class, which is something... Yeah, it wasn't typical suburbia, right?
Well, and they make that interesting comment, too, like, what's the sister's name?
Kelly
makes that comment about, like, oh, like, I wasn't allowed... I wasn't allowed past here because of all the, like, bad things that could happen to me. But we're presented with this movie where all of these teens that are in trouble live in suburbia.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they've been kind of conditioned socially to say, like, and this is kind of like where it alludes to, like, class and racial issues, but not in a really overt, explicit way, because it's like, oh, don't go past this street here because then you're in the city. But it's like, this fucking shit is happening in your goddamn backyards, and it's because your kids are,
and
fucking.
Can I say, the scene that we're kind of talking about, where they're driving into Detroit, and just, like, passing the, like, dilapidated homes and stuff like this. I absolutely, like, that is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. The music matches it perfectly. The style, the filters, everything, it's beautiful. Something about the decrepitness and, like, destituteness of these homes. I don't know, something about that I find really attractive in a weird, bizarre way. But I love, like, I just think that's such, like, a well put together scene.
It is. And did you notice in the whole, I mean, and that was, it was a small, short scene, but I mean, in a way, it's very deliberate because it goes on for, 60 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever. But, it is them driving past all these dilapidated houses, driving through these, like, barren neighborhoods, and there's no people. There's no fucking people.
Yeah, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Right? Like, it's just completely devoid of humanity. It's just, like, fucking husks. It's husks of buildings, and that's it.
I really liked the bleakness of it, and I thought that really... I mean, this movie is bleak.
It is. Well, I mean, when you talk about the soundtrack, and I mean, we all, every person who watches this movie, one of the first comments they ever make is on, that completely brilliant, spine-shattering score. And that music is it's brilliant, but it's bleak. It is so bleak, and it really just sort of mirrors the, like, kind of visual representation of the movie.
It captures the mood a lot, like, really well,
So I guess, like, the next kind of scene we're introduced to, let's get into it now, because everyone wants to talk about it, is we're presented with the badass seashell phone.
Oh, fuck. Oh, I love it so much. I love it.
Movie, I actually Googled, where the hell do I get this clamshell phone?
Right? I'm like, is that a compact or an e-reader or a phone? What is it? Like, I can't tell. And I still don't know. I'm not sure, because it has the Wi-Fi marks. And I'm like, okay, so this is not the 90s, because there was no goddamn gauge on how strong your Wi-Fi is in the 90s.
Well, when I was a kid, I had this, like, compact journal type thing. It was like electronic, but I mean the internet, like Wi-Fi didn't exist. We were on dial-up. Like, it had no connection to the internet, but it had those bars on it, and I don't remember if it was like the battery or just like to make it look, cool or whatever. But it doesn't exist in real life, is what I found out. It is an e-reader.
Okay, I was going to say that makes me incredibly sad, because I've never wanted something from a movie more in my life than I have wanted that shell in my hand.
I would get rid of my iPhone in a second.
And I think if I remember...
absolutely, fuck that.
I think if I remember correctly, I don't think you can anymore, but there was, like, someone on, like, Etsy or eBay, like, someone had actually, like, made a couple...
Oh, like, trying to recreate it, yeah.
And, like, sold them for, like, hundreds of dollars when this movie... Because I think that was, like, people were asking on Reddit and everything. People were like, where do I find this thing? Yeah. It's, like, the...
I just want a shell loaded with Dostoevsky's The Idiot.
When I looked it up also, like, where do I get this phone? I had read that, I think it was a director speaking about it, that the phone was meant to be dreamlike, like that's why it doesn't actually exist. And
yes! She's reading on a shell, like it's so surreal and like dream logic, Yeah.
Which makes, like, the whole movie kind of has that dreamy vibe. And the director was saying, so when he was a kid and his parents were first divorced, he would repeatedly have these dreams about some sort of being following him. And then as he got older and did the movie, essentially, he added the sexual aspect. But yeah, so that really makes sense too, because the movie just does have this really, like, dreamy vibe to it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all of the shots are, like, that was one note I made. Part of it was, obviously, the whole vocabulary of the title is it follows, and, that's, like, the MO of the entity or the being or whatever is that it's following you, but, like, not only that, but, like, just the dreaminess of it, the camera work sort of follows that same vocabulary. All of the shots, the movement of the camera is always very, like, it's sliding behind and gliding around. Like, it's not, like, jarring, like, a lot of movies, especially, in the last 15 years or so, it's like the editing is very quick and, in this it's just like the camera glides and sort of soars and stuff, and that sort of contributes to that feeling, I find.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I will bring in now, because I feel like we're going to continuously gush over this movie.
we love
so
it.
I did try to find, like, things that maybe I thought, especially as more viewings go, that maybe I was a little more critical of. So I'm interested in your guys' like opinions. I thought when I watched it this time, looking at it with a very critical eye, I felt it could have been set up better about the age of the kids. It really took me a while to process how old. I didn't know if they were teenagers in like in 11 or 12. Were they in college? Like, what process in their life? I think the first time I saw it, I always thought the sister and Paul were a lot younger than Jay. I was like, okay, Jay's in community college. I thought they might even be in, like, grade 9 or 10 when I had first seen it.
Well, I feel like the cues are very subtle in terms of that, because I was thinking about that today, actually, too. because, there's one point when she runs away from her community college, and clearly that's what it is. And her date, Hugh slash what's his actual name, Jeff. He does explicitly. He's the only person. He does explicitly say that he's 21. And so you kind of think, okay, she's probably in that age group. But when she runs away from the community college, when she stares out the window while they're studying the love song of J.L. for Prufrock, and sees that older woman just walking towards her, and she runs out in the middle of the day, she does run to that ice cream stand where Paul and Kelly are working. So I feel like they're not in school, or is that a comment on they need to be working instead of going to school? But I sort of took that as a cue that maybe they're just sort of past that high school age.
Yeah.
Young, but still sort of over the cusp of adulthood.
But is the age also part of this ambiguity?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
There's no real weather, there's no real era, maybe there's no
Yeah, and I
real
could
age.
see that, because I think you play with that, the dream state of in their age, even the scene where they're playing cards, where they're playing Old Maid, and it's these cartoonish card sets that you'd see
I had those
in the 80s.
And I'm
yeah, it's like the 80s Old Maid set.
When I see those, when I first saw them playing with those cards, I think, junior high kids or something, but then they're also drinking bottles of rum and stuff.
Yeah, and at one point Paul is just there tipping back a flask, and I was like, okay, you're probably still underage drinking, because I'm assuming you're under 21, but it's still sort of you've probably crossed that 18-year-old adult quote unquote threshold.
So I guess now that you bring it up, I guess I can see with the dreamscape of it and trying to make everything ambiguous. I can see that now. I do want to rewind it back a little bit to part we skipped past. I think is probably one of the more iconic scenes. So that is when Jay actually gets it.
Oh yes, yeah.
I thought it was so beautiful. When they're in that creepy parking lot next to the Packard plant.
Oh, but with that overhead lighting in the car,
Yes,
that beautiful
and,
orange yellow glow,
yes.
and the beautiful the
Gorgeous.
flowers. They're not flowers. More like grass that's breaking up out of
Yes.
that
The
abandoned
concrete.
industrial parking lot, but that beautiful green grass and her
Yes. Red
terribly
nails.
painted red nails. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And it's,
She didn't get that
and
shit
it's
on
interesting we
Instagram. This is Kmart nail polish there.
It's interesting we talk about the beauty of the shot, and of course I had written down, is this possibly the most unromantic place to have sex ever?
I mean, when you're young,
But
it doesn't really matter.
I think it's an interesting contrast of how beautifully shot, how vivid the colors are, but outside that spotlight, we're presented with this rundown hospital.
It's a plant.
Is it a plant? It's a factory?
They used to, in real life, it was an automotive factory.
And everything,
Which is
the ground,
significant. I mean, that's part of the economic collapse.
and
right?
the ground is cracked concrete. Everything's very ugly.
The only vegetation is a couple little sprouts that come up out of it. Cracks in the sidewalk. Yeah.
And everything is ugly outside of these outside of this overlay.
But I think, no offense to Detroit, but I think that's such a Detroit thing, right? Since 2008 or whatever, that's, pretty iconic for Detroit. It's a place that all the, is heavily manufacturing industry, and it, since it's shut down, that's what it looks like. It's abandoned buildings. There's a lot of dilapidation. It's no different than the homes. I think it's fitting for the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I won't go there yet because we will get there. But
I
to me, it's sort of it ties in with the whole kind of failure of the patriarchy and white capitalism. But anyway, go ahead.
I do want to say, too, when she's, like, laying there before he, like, you know, puts ether or whatever over her mouth,
before he drugs her.
And, what?
Before he drugs her.
Yeah, it's, like, also very dreamy, and I can't remember particularly what she says, but her, like, monologue there, that's, like, 30 seconds, it was very dreamy and, like, innocent, naive.
Well, I think she actually says, like, this is how I dreamed and imagined and fantasized, it was going to go.
It reminded me of the Virgin Suicides, like, that.
Oh, that hazy, yeah.
Yes, and, like, something, you know how the Virgin Suicides, the sisters would, like, narrate the story?
Yeah.
And they had this really, like, innocent, like, beautiful way of saying things, but their story is also tragic as well, so I just remind me of that as well.
Oh, yes, because she does this monologue about, like, oh, this is how I always dreamed it would be when I was younger, and this was my fantasy, and then she gets a rag full of ether, and...
Yeah.
And then we get presented with probably one of my favorite scenes. So she wakes up tied to the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Which I guess is why I thought it was a hospital, because I was just like,
where did that come from?
Where did did he bring this wheelchair? Was it in here already? Or did
he just go out to the sidewalk and there was some random abandoned wheelchair out there, which frankly I wouldn't argue with, because I'm sure there's abandoned medical paraphernalia all over the place.
But yeah, so this is where she's first presented with it, and what it does. Kind of, this is where we're introduced to the rules of the game, the rules of the movie. How can you survive it? And this is, to me, was the best camera work in the film. Because we had it looked like the camera was...
mounted in front of her.
It was mounted in front of her on the wheelchair, so every little nook and cranny that wheelchair hit, the camera bounced with it. You kind of felt that terror she was feeling.
Yeah.
I thought that was my favorite shot.
But it's really interesting, because I sort of made note of the same thing. Especially because when you look at the movie leading up to that point and the movie after that point, that scene, like you said, it's iconic. And the camera work is actually a huge part of why that scene works so well, because it's so different from the rest of the movie. Because I think the camera work, sort of like I said earlier, follows the vocabulary of the movie. It follows. A lot of the camera work seems to be shooting the back of the characters' heads, because it's always something behind them and coming up on them. Whereas in that one scene, you are in her fucking face and witnessing her terror. So that's why it's so effective, because it completely, like, drastically departs from the, like, style of the shots in the rest of the movie.
I felt that way too, because that scene specifically really made me be able to put myself in her position. Like, oh my god, what if this happened to me? I have no clue what's going on. You know, I was gonna have sex with this guy, or did have sex with this guy. I pass out, I wake up, like, tied to a wheelchair. You have no clue what's going on. So I felt like that scene was really good in allowing you to, like, really focus in and, like, be able to put yourself in her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, she's waking from a drugged state, so you know she's going to be, like, completely disoriented, and it's going to be shaky. Like, her vision is going to be as shaky as that camera is when it's, like, bouncing on that, like, gravel.
I think after that, too, I kind of I've seen this movie several times, right? And I was able to just watch the movie from her perspective of, like, how she would be feeling going through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And we should also, I figure, talk about, or not talk about, just brief overview, just in case a refresher, you forget. So she's introduced to these rules that now that she has had sex, she now has it. It can come in the form of someone you know or you don't know, and it slowly follows you. You can never outrun it, but you can get ahead of it.
Okay, I have a question about this. And this is what I thought the first time I watched this movie. Why don't these people just, like, fly and move to the halfway across the world? And And then if it gets there, then, like, come back. But then what did you say about how they can get on planes? And then we were talking about the logistics of that.
So Exilia brought up, why wouldn't they just move to Japan?
I mean, these people it is not walking fast.
But, basically, they don't really say anything in the movie, but I saw that, what did I say his name? David Mitchell, the writer and producer. He said that the theory behind it was that it could technically board a plane
and
get, like, it could walk on a plane.
Well, yes, because nobody else other than the person who's afflicted with it sees it. So this entity could just, like, it's invisible, ostensibly, right? Like, you know, when it pulls on her hair, you know, in that scene at the beach, you know, it could just get on a plane. It could just walk in the ocean. Does it breathe? Like, and that's a whole other set of questions that I don't think we can really get into.
And that's something I didn't take into account because I was like, how's it getting through, like, you know, airport security? And,
to be
like,
fair, most of the time it's
ID on
naked,
the
so
plane.
what would it set off? Nothing. It's not wearing a belt. It's not carrying change or keys that is going to make it have to go through secondary fucking inspection.
I guess I had forgot, kind of, because you see it so often.
Yeah.
I had forgot that
it's invisible. You can't see it. The only one person can see it, and that's what's so interesting about it.
Whoever's inflicted with it, or has been in the past,
And so once we find out that she has it, this is kind of where, I know when, at my first watch, I think the obvious go-to is you were like, oh, it's obviously this sexual transmitted disease.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I get it. Like, he's making this comment about, like,
infection,
STI. But the more I thought about it, the more watches I get, I don't know what you guys took from it. I kind of got it as, and this might fit into what you were talking about, Mike, where you were saying that you felt this was kind of like a really a feminist film from that perspective. I felt it was kind of a representation of the stigma, like, of slut shaming, of, like, being a slut. And, like, that's what it kind of represented. To me, when I watched it, that's kind of what I thought. It was just this whole thing about, like, oh, as a young woman, like, you're now sexually active, and you now have this, in this movie, you have it, but, you know, in a societal sense, you have, like, this title following you now, that you're no longer innocent. It's like this break of innocence.
Oh, yes, and he does actually say, the Hugh/Jeff, remember when they do finally track him down, and go to his house, and he does actually make a comment that I thought was interesting, in that, you know, he says, I thought it would be easy for her because she's a girl. She could just go out and find somebody to sleep with, and, you know, whereas he would have to work for it.
This is something I had read as well. So obviously, there's parallels between this and STIs, and specifically between this movie and HIV.
Yes.
So a lot of people kind of draw that parallel, but the David Mitchell guy, it was nothing in depth. It was like a one sentence kind of thing, but he said the way he looks at it is actually just about love and intimacy and trying to, like, escape that, you know, experiencing it and trying to escape it. But, I mean, I don't know. I don't really see that. Maybe he didn't, you know, maybe if I read more of what he said about it. But I think the interesting thing about movies is, like, you know, they are open to interpretation. He lives in our society, even if he doesn't outwardly, you know, think the movie is about this, you know. What we produce is always constructed in our society, in our daily life. So
and I was gonna say too about it, I thought it was interesting too, because he talks about that it can manifest into someone you don't know or someone you do know,
or yourself
because
that Greg guy.
But I thought it was interesting that I think it was really only once that it manifested as someone they didn't know, which was the old lady in the college. Because she didn't know at the time, because when we first see it, it is Hugh's mother later, is it not?
Yep, but who's the tall guy? Like, she doesn't.
Yeah, there's the
really
tall
know
guy in the
tall
house.
guy.
The first
And
time.
the kid,
Oh,
and
yeah, that's-
the kid on the beach.
No.
Although the kid on the beach you
The-
do see in the neighborhood.
No, the kid at the beach, it manifests as the sister.
As Yara. No,
with
it's
glasses.
Yara. Yeah.
No, that's the friend.
That's the friend,
But
Oh,
then
the friend.
when remember when there's the
Oh,
hole?
Yes,
The
when
hole,
they
and it's
when
the
they
boy.
kick the hole in the door,
Yeah.
it's that little
But
child.
He's
yeah.
the boy on the
You
bike.
do see
Yeah.
that boy in the neighborhood.
Most
And
of them,
we had
and then
said-
after that, when she gets in the car and runs away, to later go into the cornfield, when she's running away, it does go back to that girl Annie from the beginning. So you are
Yes.
right in that most of the manifestations of it are callbacks to people that we have seen consciously or unconsciously at some point. in
And
the
then
movie.
and at the end, it's her dad.
her
Her
dad, yes,
dad,
who
and-
we've seen several pictures of, but you don't really absorb it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I was saying to each, like, because when we were reading through some of the facts and stuff, like, one of the other interesting things was that the correlation made when they're playing the Old Maid game, all of the cards they show are actually characters that it manifests as. So there's, like, a boy on a bike.
The old maid
which is that boy, the old
at
lady.
the community college. Yeah.
It's like the waitress, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So that's like kind of a cool fact. I guess like like I said, I love this movie, so I was really trying to find things to be critical. I was a little shaky on the rules of it in terms of that it can do all these things. Once you get it, at some point it shows up, but like it can't walk through doors, but it can knock holes through doors. Like it never enters a locked door. It's got to bust a window. It
like at
busts
Greg's
Greg's
house,
window
yeah.
to get in. I thought it was interesting that this entity can't enter a locked door.
I guess that's true too, because when it throws that red ball through Jay's window, like the first time.
Oh yes, yeah, that first night.
we ever see it, right? That's, I'm assuming, breaks through the window.
Yeah, so
But then they turn around and look at it, and it's up on the fucking roof. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's so
well,
yeah.
Well, and
We had seen that's a mess up.
yeah, well,
Or is it the dream logic that we've
the
spoken about?
director didn't say that, but I saw someone online just pointed out that they felt it was a character flaw, that there was no reason for it to be on the roof, because how is it going to get to her from the roof?
Yeah.
But also, what was it that it's like it always takes, basically the path of least resistance.
Yeah, it's like the path. But yeah, that was kind of my thought, because I was thinking when they're in the house, when Paul comes over to sleep over, and I think that's kind of the first big, other than the college, that's the big confrontation in the house.
Yeah.
Like the door, I'm assuming the doors are locked, and it is just in her kitchen. So I'm thinking if
Well, yes, because remember they heard a smash. Yeah.
Yeah, if it can manifest in the kitchen, like, why can't it just then manifest in her bedroom?
But it got through
It busted out a window
the
or
window
something. Yeah.
with that ball,
okay,
with
yeah,
that red ball.
yeah.
And also, I'm interested to see everyone's kind of favorite manifestations of it. I know mine, to me, the tall guy was super scary.
Oh, my skin crawls. That is honestly, and
When
again,
he ducks-
full disclosure, I saw it in theaters several times. I've probably watched it 9 or 10 times since it came out, and every time I watch it, the one part I look forward to the most is when they open that door and Yara, who is also my favorite character in the movie, is standing there, and then the tall guy looms behind her, and it just always makes my skin crawl. It's so well done. It's such a brilliant scene. And it's so funny because that brings me to one of my notes and something that X said earlier about the, like, cramped, like, cluttered spaces. Right? Like that, and that's one of the things about this, like, kind of socioeconomic commentary. They're in these, like, cramped fucking, like it's so realistic, these houses, like, they've got the, like, peeling paint and the fucking doors that have, grime on them around the handles, it's just like this cramped space and, you know, these huge, gaudy thrift store dressers and shit, and it's like they open this door up and then there's this giant tall guy just like completely taking over the frame of the door while this like, you know, beautiful young girl with like these beautiful glasses just stands there and she's completely oblivious.
Yeah. I love that too. I think she's like eating, like gnawing on a piece of licorice or something. Like,
oh, it's very casual. It's so cash, yeah.
I think my favorite manifestation, because I think it's hilarious, is when it kills Greg, and it's Greg's mom, and she's like having sex with him. And first of all, I was like, their panties
I was going to say, she's still wearing her panties. Yeah. I've made a note, I've got a note here saying, like, Greg's mom is wearing her underwear. They are not, they are not crotchless. They are not crotchless underwear.
And he's wearing his panties.
In my notes, it just says, you died by getting fucked by your mom, LOL.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, like, how this happens. Like, she rubbed him to death, and then he just, like, instantly dies. And he looks like, you know, about 2 days dead.
I assume from the beginning scene, when we first see what it is capable of with Annie on the beachfront, I feel like it...
Well, they say don't let it touch you. Because clearly it can touch you and, like, just break your bones.
It just kind of bent her, I guess, as it humps you.
And it's just so funny because another one of my notes was actually related to that. And hang on now, where did it go?
But yeah,
skip ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
No. We'll just edit this out.
No, go ahead.
No,
it's natural.
Go ahead.
It's a casual conversation.
It is a casual conversation.
Mike was just looking it up. I was going to say, while you're looking for that, the other thing I wanted to bring up...
And it's just funny, I want to read literal, like, from my notes.
Go ahead.
Just because, you know, we're kind of at this point in the episode. I'm looking at this and I'm not really sure. I have arrows drawn from like one note to the other and it's all over the place. But it says, Greg's dicking doesn't solve the problem either.
Greg was 100% sure.
This is where we are. Greg dicked her down and it didn't do shit. It didn't do dick. The dicking didn't do dick.
Oh, Greg.
Greg was so sad because he lasted about a day.
Greg was so confident he was going to last. So I want to talk about, when she is scared and these things are happening to her, and then Greg comes in as the knight in shining armor and says, hey, my parents have this pool house, this cottage, they go out. I took note, is she possibly the worst shot ever? Because she was busting off those rounds and she hit nothing except once.
My answer is no, because I have down here at the pool scene, I said, Paul and that gun, though, yikes. This guy cannot shoot anything except for Yara's leg, pretty much. Well, he does end up after they throw the blanket over, but...
Yeah, but he has to literally, like, gun is a ranged weapon. He has to literally walk up to within 5 inches of this thing covered in a blanket to get a shot in.
Yes.
Like, a gun is a ranged weapon. He could have stood, 10 feet away.
None of them know how to use guns.
I was also thinking, too, when he opened the box at the pool house, that gun, it didn't look like there was a lot of ammo in there. So I was like, is the smart idea to waste all of it with her missing these cereal boxes? I thought it was a waste of ammo.
Oh, yeah, right. When she was shooting, I forgot about her shooting the cereal boxes.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk about at the pool house that I thought was interesting is although we haven't, it doesn't make sense to me at the end of the movie because you don't think about it because we haven't seen Greg get killed yet. We have seen Annie get killed. But I kept thinking, so it comes up behind her, and everyone kind of says, oh, because we see her hair go up. It grabs it by her hair. But to me, we were presented with, the minute it touches you, you are dead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I was curious why...
She didn't die.
Why it could touch her and basically pull her around, and obviously she's the main character and we weren't gonna kill her, but even like it scraped Paul in the
abdomen,
stomach, and that kind of stuff. And now I can think like Greg and Annie, it got on top of them and it did all of its damage. But I guess to me, I felt like I was presented with the fact that Hugh was like, the minute it touches you, you're gone. That's why you can't let it near you. So I just thought, to me, it was like a little bit of a loophole, like flawed logic.
And I find that's an inconsistency in the editing style, because all those other deaths were sort of like jump cut.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it cut over sort of the actual death.
Yeah.
Except for when it got to Greg and you saw, the mother fucking him or whatever the fuck it is she's doing.
And it's very...
And Jade does get grabbed twice, though. She gets grabbed in the hair on that beach scene, and then she gets grabbed by the, quote-unquote father in the pool at the end.
And it does.
And it burns. It burns each of them. And the same thing. It touches Paul, and it burns his side.
Yeah.
I was wondering about Paul because he at that point in time he couldn't see it.
No, but he knew it was there. He knew it was there, but he couldn't see it.
But I was wondering, was he unaffected by that because he didn't have it following him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then it's like, the father at the end touched her leg in the pool, so that doesn't really make sense.
But it does show the burn on her leg, right? It shows the burn.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, to me, it's something I can look past. It's just a little
minor,
a minor thing. You need these characters to survive for however long you're going to use them.
Yes.
But I will say, to the credit of the movie, because you're talking about how, I mean, realistically, even with Greg, we don't see... There's not really any killing we see in this movie. This movie is pretty tame in terms of violence and gore.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got that shot at the beginning of Annie's, leg bent back or whatever, but I mean, other than that,
that's
you get
probably
nothing.
the most...
That primes you for the rest of the movie. You're expecting that, and it doesn't deliver.
And it's interesting how with camera work in the score and everything, that there's really this terror built. I know I always feel it when I watch it. I am scared of it, even though in a traditional sense, I've not ever really seen the damage. I see the aftermath of the damage once.
Oh yeah, but it primes you, and it's all about paranoia, and that's what's so great about this movie. It's a movie of paranoia. It plays on your expectation, and you're just paranoid for the whole movie, just like the characters are.
That's what I was kind of touching on at the beginning of us talking, was the anxiety of being trapped and being followed and not really being able to escape that. It's about that anxiety.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Hitchcock said, it's not about showing actual violence. It's showing the viewer there's a bomb that's going to go off, and then having them sit there and wait and go, there's a fucking bomb there that's going to go off, and that just ratchets up their anxiety.
Yes.
So then I guess we'll bring it around to so Paul in his schmuckiness says he has a plan to kill it.
A horrible plan.
So we go to this school, this high school on what they say the wrong side of 8 Mile. It's got a giant pool, and their plan is to electrocute it. I guess they figure they shot it a bunch of times, and they just want to get rid of it.
I love their logic, though, that, like, just out of nowhere, with no discussion, like, electricity is totally going to kill this thing.
But and the cords are not long enough to even, like, get those things in the pool.
No, they, like, sit them at the edge, but, like,
over.
they just fall into the pool, and that's about it.
And unplug.
Yeah.
And me and Exilia giggled, like, we read a piece of trivia from an interview with David Mitchell about, he said he knew that plan was silly.
Yeah, it was on purpose.
He wanted it to seem like a plan that young people, like, that a young teenager, young adult would come up with, just a stupid idea that maybe this will work.
Yeah.
And he didn't want it to be like a picture perfect solution kind of thing, something that actually worked. He was trying to get away with.
Well, I mean,
And then
you're
the fun-
departing
the
from
fun
that, like,
triv-
self-awareness of, you know, those, like, late 90s, early 2000s movies where they were like, oh, we know we're in a horror movie, so let's, you know, what would the killer do? What, you know what I mean? And it's like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other funny thing that I was telling Exilia when we were watching it that I was reading was that someone pointed out that a bunch of the electronics, they plugged in the surge protectors, which the whole point of a surge protector
You
is
won't
so that if it
electrocute
drops
yourself.
in the water,
Yeah.
it won't electrocute you. I thought that was kind of funny.
But it's brilliant, because again, you know, you're going like, the logic is twofold and completely, like, incongruous, because on one hand, you're like, I need to plug in as much shit as I can because I need to, like, dump all these appliances into the pool and, you know, just, like, put as much electricity into this water as I can, but it's like, in doing that, you're plugging it into a surge protector, which completely counteracts the entire fucking plan that you have. It's brilliant. It's completely brilliant.
I think it works with his
useful.
idea of... I think it works with his idea of, like, they're young.
It's a bad plan.
It's a bad plan.
It's a bad plan.
These kids are...
They're not
They're just
smart.
thinking, like,
it's
hey,
just,
we plug electronics into this.
Yeah. But that's why it's so realistic. The realism in this movie is, like, blows my mind, you know, in so many ways.
Yeah.
Now, when we're introduced, when we know they've gone into the school, but we're introduced to kind of the night has come, we see the exterior. This is probably my biggest issue with the movie. When it's raining and it's lightning and the sky has gone black, man, did I think that looked terrible compared to the rest of the movie, because it was obviously fake lightning.
I was going to say, it looked very
fake rain.
It looked very fake. It looked, it just looked too artificial. Because everything else looked so naturalistic in that. Like I said, you know, although the furnishings of the movie, everything, every detail of it, like, was so naturalistic. But then you get to this part, but the school or the pool or whatever it was, this building even looked like, it did not look naturalistic. It looked like, you know, a representation of, like, a haunted house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
Like, the outside of it, I was like, what the fuck is this? Is this a school? Is it a pool? Is it Freddy's house? Like, what the fuck is this?
Well, and I kind of thought, too, like, I gave it some slack, because I kind of thought, like, it's a lower budget film. They would have been getting towards the end of the movie. I kind of thought...
They've got $20 left, 2 days to shoot.
Yeah, well, I thought, like, when they were shooting it, it was probably sunny, and, like, they probably were like, this needs to look dark. And then the other thing I thought was maybe they're trying to kind of give, like, a nod to cheesy 80B movies where, like, that stuff was always fake. But I just felt it looked out of place because the rest of the movie is shot so meticulously clean. Even the dirty things look beautiful. Like, everything's shot with this sheen, but not normal movie sheen. This art, this pop, I keep going back to, like, pop art. Like, I feel it's the equivalent of pop art.
I don't think, to me, because I agree, it seems very out of place, and I don't really think that it was intentional. Like, I don't think it was, like, you know, harkening back to, you know, old cheesiness. I think it was just out of place. But I must say, when they're, like, I can't remember if they cut the fence or they're jumping the fence or whatever, and the song plays, and I I'm really bad with the names of the songs, but I think it's Title. It's one of the songs off the score, and I thought that's like one of my favorite songs on this on the soundtrack, and I thought it was like a really good placement for that. But yeah, the weather's terrible.
We're gonna argue on that one because that's my favorite song of the soundtrack, and I thought this could have been used in such a better place than this. But I get the build up. I get they're going to fight the monster. Like I said, I don't know where I would have put it, but I just felt like something else could have been used there. That's just my opinion. It's just
if you listen to the soundtrack, though, I think a lot of the other songs, with the exception of maybe 3 songs, a lot of them are more low key. And
most of them are. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, this is one of them that's more intense. So I think
So then, also, can I shout out to a friend of mine who is a screenwriter and super movie buff, and when this movie came out. He used to talk about how he would listen to the soundtrack while studying because he was a student at the time. Shout out Colton.
It's a perfect study.
It's bizarrely yes, I was gonna say it's this weird droney, some of it's just synthy and kind of has that vaguely Stranger Things feel, but some of it's also just noise drone. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it kind of just shakes, rattles your center of your being,
and there's no words to it.
No.
It's just.
And also another note that I had made was there's maybe twice in the movie that they use a diegetic song that isn't the score. Yeah. For example, I remember when she goes to the beach and sees those guys out on the boat while she's by herself and has the cast on her hand, but you don't actually hear what the song is. You hear a bit of a beat and it's okay, this is a rock song or whatever, but you don't actually hear it. So there's no actual fucking diegetic music that could pinpoint an era again, because it's this weird timeless okay, so there's kind of a beat and guitars that could be from the 80s or it could be the 90s or the 1000s or whatnot.
I think that's, now that I'm thinking about this too, the soundtrack. I mean, obviously it's a synthy soundtrack, which is 1980s, right? But it's a more modern version that is really kind of fairly popular now. So that's a thing too. That plays into this era-less whole thing.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So we're at the pool. It comes in and ruins these kids' plans by just tossing appliances at Jay's head, who's in the pool.
Again, because she's not a final girl, and she's just, her whole role is to just splash around in the pool and try to not die.
But I always giggle at that part. I think it's funny. It's just they had this plan, this funny plan that obviously wasn't going to work. And then it comes in, and then it just says, fuck it, I'm just going to start tossing this shit at her. I'm not even going to try to touch her. I'm just going to throw a blender and a TV at her head.
I mean, its plan wasn't planned, and it was a much better plan.
Yeah, no shit.
But yeah, and then we get it in the pool, and it's grabbing at her. It gets shot in the head. They finally put a blanket over it so that the others can see it.
Yeah, Kelly for the win there, bringing that blanket.
Oh, I love Kelly.
Which, now here is... Yeah. And... Yeah, so I'm sorry, I was trying to gather my thoughts. So, we get it in the pool, they shoot it, and we kind of get that explosion of blood.
Oh, the, blossom, yeah.
The blossom, how did you guys feel about that ending? I'm still iffy on the ending. I like it, but I just feel I guess we're so indoctrinated with a typical slasher, that kind of thing. You're used to this grand end fight at the end where it just kind of fizzles out.
I love how there wasn't a grand fight at the end, because I hate that. Because it's so predictable to have this big battle at the end. I like that, and then really the ending was Jay and Paul walking down the road, as I mentioned before, and
again, ambiguity. It was, I mean, the very, to the credits of that movie, it was ambiguous.
Yeah, like you don't know if that's
because it shows him and
might be walking down the road. Or
I mean, we could go into like 4 episodes of this podcast talking about the issues in this movie, because I've got like notes about like sex workers and stuff like that, because, you know, he does ostensibly try to like pass it on by going to these people. And yeah, right? Exactly. So we won't go there, because that's like, you can write a book about that. And I'm not going to, but you know, right until the very end, you don't know. Did he pass it on? Did he not? Like, what the fuck is happening here? It's ambiguity, and then, oh, boom, credits. Yeah. That's it.
I was thinking the same thing about the sex worker, and I just think of, like, look at the sex worker's role in our society, right? Look at the thing that happened here in Toronto with the guy that was, like, the van guy, right?
Yeah.
People, the whole incel movement, they're like, oh, you know, they should hire sex workers and they can, you know, have sex with them. Well, why is that the responsibility of a sex worker? And then him passing on it to a sex worker because, you know, it doesn't matter kind of thing was like implied. But then also, it's the same problem as Jay. Nobody's telling these people that this it thing is following them. Yeah. Presumably, he didn't tell them, right? So yes. I feel like he did pass it on,
and not educate them.
Didn't educate them. They died, but I mean,
it would just come back on him then. So it's his issue, because if he passed it on without educating them, it would just come back on him, and then Jay, and then go back down the line.
And this is he doesn't have a relationship. You don't see a relationship with him and the sex worker in the movie, so you have no idea actually what ended up happening
if anything.
But to me, it's kind of implied that they died and it's following him now, and that's who's following them on the sidewalk.
Yes, because he was a coward. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all in agreement that obviously the sex worker has died. Are we? I don't know, Mike.
I think so.
Because at the end, we do see in the background that someone is following them.
And it's at the same pace as it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's how... Is there... Before we get, I guess, into like the kind of our final thoughts, is there anything else we wanted to talk about? Is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, I have several pages of notes. There is but one that I just want to make reference to, because I don't know. It's just a shot that I thought was great. And I literally have written down, great shot. Paul sitting in the attic amongst Hugh's cum-wad tissues. I don't know why. I just thought that was such a great shot, and it was so emblematic of like a lot of the things going on in this movie. Like, here's this little dude, and it's like, is he in high school? Is he 20 years old? And he's just like sitting on this fucking mattress in, you know, the attic of this abandoned house in Detroit. And like, there's all these porn mags around, and it's like literally these dried cum-stained tissues everywhere, and he's just like kind of like sitting amongst it all, like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of like cum-wad tissues.
On a bare mattress.
On a bare mattress,
like,
exactly.
Bare mattresses freak me out, so like that just really added to it.
Yeah, that scene, I laughed.
Didn't they say it was sticky? Like, something was sticky too. Yeah, I can't remember if that was my imagination or...
I've got all these, like, failure of patriarchy, gun control, and I'm like, I'm just getting way too deep into this movie. Like, I can't. This is not... We're not writing a book about this. We're just having a conversation.
You can definitely, like, there's a lot of...
But there's so much going on in this movie. There's so much going on. That's why I love it. And I'm just going to say right now, we're rating Slay. This movie fucking slays everything.
Well, we'll find out. Maybe not all of us.
Oh, Rowan's trying to trick us, and then he's going to be like, yeah, obviously.
Trick us. So I think the appropriate thing that just maybe... reiterate again about this movie that we all keep bringing up is in my opinion, one of the best score soundtracks in a movie.
Yeah.
I think in itself, it has a very big cult following.
It's iconic. The score of this movie has become iconic. Even more than the movie itself.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because you see, I mean, the even like the vinyl of this is selling, because you see it in the stores stocked all the time.
Yeah. I said too, I have in my notes, like the cinematography and the music just completely made the movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, are we ready to, we'll go into what we think about this. And we will start with Mike, because we already know Mike. So
well,
Mike,
I just said
it
is
a nay, yay, or a slay?
It is a slay bitch. I love it, everything about it. Like I said, it's one of those movies that kind of has that alchemy. The naturalistic acting style, the fucking brilliant score, the cinematography, which is beautiful, but at the same time, it has that like low grade indie DIY feel to it, but like clearly everybody involved was very talented. So even though it's like a low budget movie, it is people who have studied movies and know movies and have watched horror movies, and it sort of brings this history to it, and it's brilliant. Slay.
Zelia, what do you think? Nay, yay, or slay?
It slays, just like our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Two slays, that leaves myself. I am going to give it a slay as well. I mean, it was on my top 5 list. We knew it was on Exilia's. Mike is announcing he's done a bottle of wine, so we might be starting to wrap up just in time for it not to get too messy. But
it's already messy.
Yeah, so that's 3 slays. I'll end that thought off by saying that my decision. It's beautifully styled. The soundtrack's amazing. It's a simplistic story, and the faults are very few. I think even if you had issue with anything, the soundtrack and the visual alone of the movie make it a slay. I don't think I know anyone that doesn't like this movie.
Oh, can I just interject one little thing? And again,
Certainly.
I have many notes that we haven't gotten to. But there's one in particular when we were talking about its timelessness and, like, does it take place in the 90s? So Hugh/Jeff, did you guys notice that he had a fucking Pacey Dawson's Creek vibe to him? I just had to say that. I literally just throw that out there. I can't just have this in my notebook to rot forever. Like, he is done like a blonde Pacey from Dawson's Creek. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry. I just had to throw that out there.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was kind of a call to that.
He kind of reminds me, though, of like Luke from the OC, which is early 2000s. I don't know. This is all part of the...
They're playing on everybody's nostalgia.
Man, Luke from the OC, yes. Always.
So, yeah, I didn't come as prepared for the other segments. There's no creepy cinema because I didn't look into it. And there's no screaming streaming. I will have those ready for the next one. But I did get some Scream Factory news for our collector sector. Mm-hmm. So I have 4 Blu-rays they've announced. So the first one is coming in March. It is Boris Karloff's The Body Snatcher. Scream Factory is going to be releasing that. In April, there's 2 releases. One called Superstition. I'm not familiar with that one. And, there you go. Did everyone get that? So if you're not from Canada, in Canada, we get emergency alerts. And about, like,
Oh yeah, I got
Amber Alerts if kids go missing. So we just got one that someone's missing in Toronto.
So Mike probably.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
I
so-
didn't get that. That is
It says a
That is
dad.
local only.
The suspect is a dad, and it took the kid, and they're on the highway.
And they're telling us their license plate and stuff.
Yeah, we won't announce that.
No.
I was gonna say a lot
Good
that's a
to know
dad
that
is an
much-
it.
Yeah,
It's
It
good
took
to
the
know
kid.
that it works.
and so we're okay. So Superstition, I'm not familiar with. I saw the cover. The cover looked cool. Looks like early '80s, maybe late '70s. April 2nd, they are releasing Pledge. If that is what I think it is, I think that's a fairly newer one. Are you familiar with that one, Mike?
I'm not sure if that's a newer one or an old re-release.
Okay.
I really need
I
to
could-
sort of check it out a bit more.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Because I remember
Because
seeing a
I know there's some
trailer
Pledge from like the 90s, but I don't know if it's the same one I'm
okay,
thinking
that
of
could
or not.
be it. I remember there was kind of like a psychological horror one that came out a couple of years ago about like fraternities and stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right?
And then probably the biggest one that I think's making the hugest buzz is May 28th. They are releasing Night of the Creeps.
Oh, yes. Night of the Creeps. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
If you pre-order it now, it comes with an action figure.
Tom Aikens.
So this is one that I surprisingly have never seen.
What? I have the VHS. I love it. Classic.
Everyone I know loves it, and I haven't seen it yet, so I will have to get on that.
It's a good, like, kind of a... It was sort of a proto-Scream in that it was one of these movies that's sort of, it's like a horror comedy that poked fun at the tropes of horror while also honoring them and homaging them.
Oh, okay, yeah. See, and that's everyone that told me it's, like, really funny, and... Yeah,
it's just a fun movie. It's fun. It's a very fun movie.
I'm gonna have to see it. So I think that's about it. Does anyone have anything else to add in? Mike, any last It Follows talk?
I'm not gonna... No, I mean, I've got Do People Fucking Hospitals in my notes. No, this is fine. I'm good.
We might have to
let's
revisit it.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not anything
I
of
like
substance. I have nothing of substance to say. Thank you.
a 2.1 where we just go back to Mike's notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you for listening to the first review. I will say that my plan is I don't know where I'll post it, probably on the Facebook, on the Instagram, everywhere probably, but I'm going to start keeping a graphic to show the movies we review and show you what we rated them, so people can look back and see what we thought and if maybe they're interested.
Also, if we review something that's a bit obscure and we need to get it from not so legitimate sources, we will try to post links to places online where you can watch it.
Exactly. Because F the law.
Mm-hmm.
Can I announce the next review?
Yeah, we'll let Exilia. We will announce the next review.
I'm taking over the host role now. So the next review is The Invitation. Mike, have you seen The Invitation?
No, and I've wanted to watch it for a very long time, so this is why I'm very looking forward to it.
We saw this quite recently.
I've
maybe
seen
in
this
the
a couple
past,
times.
and then I've seen it maybe in the past 3 weeks or something. And yeah, I won't say if I like it or not, but it's on Netflix, so it's really easily accessible.
And that is what we will be reviewing next.
So watch it beforehand.
Yeah, watch it beforehand, so when the Invitation review goes out, you can follow along and know what we're blabbing on about. So I guess that'll be everything. I want to thank everybody for listening. And then I'll do kind of the general blurb. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
It Slays Podcast.
It Slays Podcast on all social media. I'll announce now, we will, probably after about 3 or 4 episodes, we will be launching a Patreon. I'm in the process of setting it up, so there'll be all different tiers where you can support the podcast, and we'll have perks. I'm sure there'll be stuff we give away, and I'm thinking you might be able to influence what we watch. Make us watch.
Oh, please
something
influence
a little more cultured, or something a little more extreme, whatever kind of sicko you are. But yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you for listening. Did you guys all want to say bye as well? Or
Thanks, bye.
This is Mike saying thank you. Love y'all.
Right on. So, as always, hopefully you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time.